Fratallone's Ace Hardware and Garden Stores brings you Garage Logic Podcast number 327, Feb 20, 2020. It was 57 degrees on this day in 1981 and 20 below on two occasions, 1941 and 1989. And might I add, on this day in 2011, we had 12 inches of snow.
And now, from the mayor's office, above the boathouse on the east shore of Spoon Lake, it's Garage Logic. With Rookie on production, Chris Reavers, director of social media, John Hyde in the newsroom, and occasionally Kenny from the Krabby Coffee Shop. Here is your flashlight king, fireworks commissioner, and keeper of common sense, your mayor, Joe Soucheray.
Morrow is back there. Now Johnson, 19 seconds. Johnson over to Ramsey. Villaletonoff gets checked by Ramsey. McClanahan is there. The puck is still loose. 11 seconds. You've got 10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Schultz. 5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Rob?
Yeah.
That clip answers a question for me. I was wondering if you were on the ice because I couldn't remember. You were on the ice at the end of the game.
Yes, I was. But if you watch it closely enough, nobody wanted the puck. No one wanted to be the one to screw up.
No, I believe you. You were afraid of Herbie at some point, weren't you?
I was more afraid of the Russians.
Yep. Were they the toughest opponent you've ever played?
They were by far the best team I've ever played against. Absolutely.
I should call you coach, by the way. You're coach of the Blake Bears. You're 18-3 or 18-5. Do you play tonight?
19-6 we ended up. We played our first section game tonight against Hopkins, and so we ended up being the top seed in our section, 6AA, and we play Hopkins tonight, and then the winning team will play on Saturday.
What does this weekend mean to you? That game occurred on Friday afternoon, February 22nd, 1980. And I was doing some homework, Rob, and I had not realized that ABC Television, which had the broadcast rights, they went to the various authority figures, the Olympic Committee and whatnot, begging them to move that game to prime time, and they would not because they didn't want it to feature any political significance, which was a delusion of grand proportions because it was it had a lot of political implications, maybe not for you guys, but certainly for the world.
Well, we were brought into it a little bit just from all the telegrams that we received during the 10 days prior to that game. So we knew there was an impact of some kind. We just had no idea as to how strong the U.S. was truly behind us, the U.S. being all the country.
Well, Russia had just invaded Afghanistan. Jimmy Carter threatened and succeeded to boycott the 1980 Summer Games in Moscow. Walter Mondale, then vice president, sat behind you guys. I thought there was a lot of political messaging going on, but that didn't take away from the excitement of what I consider the best sporting event I'll ever see in my life.
Well, I can't argue with that, Joe. I have to agree with you on that.
Take us through that day leading up to that game. It was a 4:00 start Eastern time in Lake Placid.
No, I think it was 5, but
all right.
It was late. Herbie was very prepared for everything, and so he wasn't any different this game, and we just went about our business, and I don't recall if we had a morning skate that day or not, but when you're playing that late, you got to do something during the day. So I'm sure we did something to just get our blood flowing, and in those days there wasn't any video that we watched or anything like that. So we got to the rink, we got ready, and were we nervous? Hell yeah, we were nervous, but we were also prepared, and it started out reasonably well, and we didn't get blown out right away like a lot of us were thinking after the 2 weeks prior game against Soviets in Madison Square Garden. So we also had known that, one thing Herbie had said, they had to come from behind in the pool play. They had to come from behind against the Finns and the Canadian team.
Mm-hmm.
So they were flat. They weren't running on all cylinders. So there was an opportunity there. And I think there's no question Herbie sensed that. And as the game progressed, we sensed it. Now, were we outplayed? I would say yes. But we took advantage of any and all opportunities that came our way, and things worked out.
Did Herbie introduce any new thoughts to that game on how you guys should play it?
He should have told us or shown us how to change our underwear after we went up for it.
But he turned you loose, more or less, is how I remember it.
No, he just said, all he said was play your game. He didn't tell us, he didn't handcuff us, put it that way, right? Yeah. By that point in time, if you don't know what to do, or if you're going to make mistakes. And the one thing that Herbie changed on the Olympic team and his tactics from his days at Minnesota when I was there was that you touched upon it, he let us go.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't handcuff us. He didn't tell us, you can't do this or you can't do that. What he did do throughout the entire year is, you can do this and you can do that. And he opened the window of creativity to us. Now, with that said, if you watch that game, like I said earlier, we were outplayed for most of the game. But the one thing we were in better shape than the Soviets. We were in better shape than any team in the tournament.
Really?
Oh, there's no question about it.
That's because of the infamous Herbies, probably.
He worked us hard.
Yeah.
When he picked the team in August after the tryouts, 2 weeks of tryouts, the first practice we had was the next day, and he said, you guys are going to improve more in the next 6 months than you have your entire lives, and here's why. In basketball, you can't score without the ball. In football, you can't score without the ball. In hockey, you can't score without the puck. We're not going to give up the puck. We're not going to dump it. We're not going to go just up and down our lanes. We're going to interchange. We're going to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
And, by the way, we may not be the best team in the Olympics, but we are going to be the best conditioned team in the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't lie.
Mm-hmm. What's the great story you told me one time about somebody came to you after you were doing the Herbies, and someone came up to you and told you it could have been worse? Remember that?
Oh, God. Eric Strobel. That wasn't about Herbies, but so I had just gotten my head handed to me by Herbie.
Right.
I don't know if it was after. It had to be during a practice or something. But Herbie had come into the locker room, and he came down, and he just chewed me a new one, up and down, front and back. And Eric Strobel came up to me, and he was probably 3 inches from my face with a big grin on his face. And he just said, Rob, it could have been worse. And he hesitated. And then he grinned even wider, and he said, that could have been me. So, Joe, you'll appreciate this. I might have told you that story when we were playing golf, because when somebody hits a really bad shot,
right,
I wait, and as we're walking to go try to find it, I tell that story.
Right. It's exactly what you did. You said, Souche, it could have been worse. It could have been me. What was your relationship with Herbie? Not you specifically. Well, yes, you, but the entire team. Did he create a situation where he wanted you guys to be a unit in opposition to him? Is that a fair statement?
I think it's very fair. Herbie wanted to remove all subjectivity as much as possible in terms of his decisions. So he, there's a scene in the movie where Kurt Russell says, I'm not their friend, I'm their coach. That's your job, or something like that. Mm-hmm. He said that to Craig Patrick. That's absolutely true. Herbie he was not my friend. He was not our friend. Now, he may have had a better relationship or a deeper relationship with the guys who had not played for him at Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
But without question, the guys that played for him at the U, the only relationship we had was player-coach. And I'm not saying that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that's the way he operated.
He also did not let you guys talk to the press until after the final game in which you won the gold medal.
He didn't want anybody getting pulled out and being played as a favorite.
Okay,
Mark Johnson would have been interviewed endlessly,
right,
to be quite honest. I'm sure Jimmy Craig would have been interviewed. And that was Herbie's deal about Herbie kind of had a interesting relationship with the press, as you well know, Joe.
Yeah.
I mean, he was combative from the get-go, and I don't know why he chose to do that, but as long as we were winning, I'm sure he wasn't going to change. I'm sure he was as superstitious as a lot of us are.
Tell us the story of your injury and his reaction to it.
All right, for the first game against Sweden, first shift of the game, in the offensive zone, I was going down to chase after a puck, and I tried to jump up to avoid a check, and I got checked into the boards, and my thigh, I had a major contusion in my leg. I mean, it was like dropping a piece of ice in a glass of warm water, and that's how it felt. It just, you could just feel it going from my knee up to my hip. And so I went in, and I was in the locker room, and the trainer had said, "You're done for the day. If you're lucky, you may be able to play the rest at some point in the tournament." So I had all my gear off, and I'm on my back with my leg bent and an ice pack on it. And then all the guys came in and checked me out and asked me how I was doing. And then Herbie walked in, and, you know, for those who've seen the movie, it was reasonably accurate, but it was far more intense in real life. Now, I had seen Herbie chew people out in the past. I saw him go after Joe Micheletti at the U when he had a bad knee, and I saw him go after Tommy Vannelli one time in similar fashion. And he was just doing that to, you know, motivate the players, I guess. In this case, I was not expecting it, and I was totally surprised. So I jumped up, and I literally almost threw a punch at him. And he had turned and gone out of the locker room into the hallway, and I followed him out there. And I'm screaming at him, and I'm telling him, "You're not going to tell me if I can play. I'll tell you if I can play." And while we're doing this, the Swedish locker room was right down the hall, and this is the first period of the first game of the Olympics. You got the Swedish players looking out, hearing all this noise, and they're going, the U.S. has already lost their marbles. Because we are literally arguing and screaming at each other in the hallway.
Well, was he denying that you were hurt?
No, he knew I was hurt.
Yeah.
He did that because, so I've heard him say this. As I said, I've never talked to him about it. He knew he thought we were playing a little nervous. And I'm not going to argue with him on that one. He was right, I'm sure. But I didn't see any of the first period. And so he tried to change our focus. He tried to get us off of being nervous. And again, basically the whole team said, "Screw you, Herb." And we came together.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant.
And then Bake scored that big goal.
He really had a method to his madness when you look back on it.
There was nothing that Herbie did that wasn't planned out.
Isn't that
and
something?
I mean nothing.
Isn't that something?
Well, it wasn't madness at all.
No, it was brilliance.
No, it was somewhat crazy, but I'm telling you, he was the only coach who was prepared to go up 4-3 with 10 minutes left in the game against the Soviets.
Isn't that something?
There is no other coach in my mind that would have been ready for that.
Mm-hmm. He didn't
Doesn't
panic,
mean
in
he
other
wasn't
words.
nervous.
No.
He just dumbed it down. He truly dumbed it down. He didn't say anything. He wasn't critical. He wasn't anything other than play. All he said was play your game. That's all he said. And he repeated it endlessly.
And didn't handcuff you.
No, not at all.
He told me once
we already were doing that well enough on our own.
Right. He told me once he thought the Soviets were handcuffed, that they weren't allowed to become creative, that they stayed in their lanes and they didn't innovate.
Well, they didn't that game.
No.
And things happened that game that never happened in the past. Joe, they didn't pull their goalie.
Oh, that's right. My God, you're right. They didn't pull their goalie. Yeah. Were your parents in the room? Were your parents in the building?
Yes. They were there for the Olympic Games. Yep.
That had to be a tremendous thrill. I would imagine your father closely followed your hockey career.
Oh, my parents followed, but I grew up in a family of 5, and it was a different era.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't push me to play hockey. They pushed us to play a variety of sports and follow what we wanted to. As a matter of fact, when I was younger, as a peewee, traveling teams didn't exist in the metro area, and they were created when I was in 5th grade. So I was able to play peewees, and my dad was so mad because they were asking for money because you have to pay for these tournaments and you travel and all this stuff. And he's a trust officer at First Bank of St. Paul making nothing.
Yeah.
And he's got to come up with this money to pay for one of his kids to go off and do some stupid traveling team.
This is in the Mounds View district.
Yeah, it was back in those days. It was called Lake Region.
Yep.
The Lake Region Rovers.
Take us through the post game of the February 22nd game. We haven't gotten to what I consider the miracle, which was the first gold medal by a U.S. team since 1960, which came Sunday, Feb 24. But what was the night of Feb 22 like after you guys won that game?
Oh boy, I don't even remember. I'll say this: I don't remember that Friday night,